I'm Catherine Sharon, host of the podcast Horse Tales with Cat. Today's guest is a rider, coach, and author whose influence has been felt far beyond the borders of the confines of Nova Scotia, where she resides. Jen Marsden Hamilton had tremendous success as a junior in both the open jumpers and equitation, and shared her expertise as a national coach for a number of young rider teams. Her book, Stride Control, gives riders exercises to get them set up for their success at the shows and has become a mainstay for many riders all over the world. Jen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I have to, before we even really get started, share with our listeners that for me, this is a full circle moment because years ago, like about 35 years ago, you used to come to Ottawa to do clinics. I think it was at Bellevue, if I'm not mistaken, which
I think was Marchcroft.
Oh, it was Marchcroft. Okay. I know it was out in Dunrobin, and I worked at a restaurant and used to come in for dinner. And each time you came in for dinner, you always just said, what do you recommend tonight? And you would take whatever it was that I recommended that night. And so I can't believe that here it is 35 years later, and now I'm getting to interview for the equestrian podcast that I do. So I was quite excited about that. And then secondly, I also think that like many Canadians, we've always associated you as a Canadian because you've spent so many years in Nova Scotia. But I know, in fact, that you were born in Albany, New York. So that was another aha moment for me in this last month. Let's start with, where did it all begin for you in New York and riding?
Well, actually, I lived in Schenectady, which is next to Albany.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those places you can only spell it or pronounce it if you came from there. And Schenectady was, in many ways, the end of the world in the horse world, for heaven's sake. Anyway, at 9, I started going to my place stables that was owned by Russell and Joe Stewart. Russell Stewart became very famous. Later, jumped big jumps and won a lot, and so did his son, Rusty. It was the most wonderful place to learn how to ride. We went there and spent all day. We helped muck out, we did everything. And we work hard because that would get you an extra ride. It was so exciting. And if you really worked hard, you got to take your peanut butter and jam sandwich and sit at the kitchen table with the stewards. And if you really, really worked hard, you got to stay overnight. It was heaven. Absolutely wonderful. And my father got us a horse, which my sister and I actually ruined, but that's another story. And I also was given the opportunity to ride one of Mr. Stewart's horses called Little Fiddle. And Little Fiddle went on to be AHSA national champion, second-year green hunter of the United States against all the professionals. It was amazing. He was the most amazing horse. And I was 12, and I basically just would point and shoot, and he did the rest. So I guess one of the most important things I learned was stay out of the way of a good horse. At the same time, I was riding an open jumper for Mr. Stewart named My Indian Princess. And she was blind in one eye. And so I really learned how to turn properly and get straight. And I actually, at 12 years old, on My Indian Princess, competed against William Steinkraus.
Wow.
I didn't win, but I was in the same arena with him. It was pretty amazing. Then we actually left the Stewarts and we built our own barn and we bought a new horse, Wee Geordie, that I jumped big jumps on. He was a thoroughbred. And we bought several horses from Stuart Holding from Guelph. A lot of people remember him. It was a great time, and I did well, and I learned a lot. And in this time that we just had our own place, I learned by watching other people. I basically was a stalker.
Mhm.
And I had great people to watch. There was Happy Kustner, who was my absolute hero, and Rodney Jenkins and people. But then in 1963, so I'm definitely dating myself, George Morris had an ad in the back of the Chronicle of the Horse saying that he was thinking of becoming a professional. And so for Christmas in 1963, I asked for George Morris to be my Christmas present.
Wow. What a gift.
It was wonderful. George was in Sable Forks at the time, which was north of us. And he would come down and give me lessons. And it was in the snow outside. My first lesson with George was a lunge lesson in minus 10-degree weather, Fahrenheit. As a result of that lunge lesson, I had never lunged anyone on a horse. It was brutal. Skin loses its elasticity in the cold. Anyway, I stuck it out, and I guess that impressed him, and I went on to great times with George.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I actually had the privilege of speaking with him about a month ago, and he mentioned to me that you were his first paying customer.
Yep.
So not only did you search him out, you were the first, which I think is
That's right.
phenomenal.
Mhm.
And I was also curious, so where was he prior to that, before he turned professional? Was he just riding as an amateur?
No, he, after the Olympics, the 60 Olympics, George went to the theater.
Oh.
And then he decided to get back into the horses, and that's when it all started.
Wow. And then I guess my other question for you would be, why did he lunge you the first time out?
Who knows?
That does sound like a really tough go.
I think it was a test.
Okay, and clearly you passed.
I did.
And so how long did you ride with him?
Probably 5 years, but when you talk, it was a different ride with someone than it is now. We had our own place. I would see George over March break. I would go down there, or I'd go for a lesson once in a while, and I'd meet him at the shows. And so the lessons, he would teach me new things or new concepts, and then I would go home and practice, and then I'd go back to him, and it was tested whether I was any good. But the main thing was I'd see him at horse shows. So very different than it is now.
To your point, I was going to say nowadays people are with a trainer at the barn. They go on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually wanted to speak to that a little bit with you, because I know you are a fan of, you really need to be learning those basics at home as opposed to at the horse show. So, practice what you've learned at the horse show and then go back home and work on what it is that needs to be worked. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, let's remember that when the in-gate shuts behind you, you're on your own. Mm-hmm. And I like to teach independence in that we want training is to declutter the brain. And what we're trying to do is train habits so you don't have to think about things. If someone is always telling you what to do, you are not forming habits. Now, if you're on your own, sure, you can develop some bad habits. That's why you have to go and have it checked out and things by somebody on the ground and everything. Actually, in my book, Stride Control, I try to have a series of exercises, a progressive program that you can actually work on your own and you get immediate feedback because it's pole exercises and this type of thing. So you start to take responsibility for your ride and you get confidence by being able to take responsibility for your ride.
Yeah, it's interesting because you also touched on a few things when you were saying you were at a barn initially before you built your own, and the fact that you did everything. You mucked the stalls, you were there 24/7, you were having lunch with the stewards, this whole just being engulfed in the energy of horses. And I feel like that's something that is somewhat lost today. I feel sad for a lot of the younger riders coming up through the ranks. I feel like they don't seem to, I don't know if it's that they don't have that opportunity or they don't search out that opportunity. Or
I think it's both. I think society has changed drastically. We were different kids then. And probably I shouldn't use the word feral, but we were much more wild than, and we were allowed to be, and society allowed us to be, than kids are now. We developed such a passion for what we were doing. Now it just, with so many, it just seems to be another activity. The horses for us was not an activity. It was a life. And the whole family becomes engulfed in this life. It was wonderful. And I feel sad for kids now. Just different. Times change.
no, I would agree with you. I always feel like growing up, it was, and for me, for sure, continues to be a passion. I would do anything for my horse and I would sacrifice whatever I need to in order to continue doing what I do with him. But I do feel like that was a good way to describe it. For a lot of people, it is just an activity nowadays. And I don't know where that really changed. If, as you said, it's just that it was different times. We had a lot more freedom. We were at the barn every day. That was just where you spent your time. I don't know. Do you feel as well the goals are different with riders coming up through the ranks today?
Yeah, I do. I think there's too much emphasis on competition. People are taught how to show, how to compete, versus actually learning the basic skills of horsemanship, how to look after the horse, do everything with them, how to notice if something is wrong. You should be able to see or feel that something is wrong or something is right. I don't think that's there anymore.
So we've jumped way ahead, and then I'm sorry that I started asking you about training. I wanted to talk a little bit more about your journey and how you decided to go into the training segment, because we started off talking about your early success, and I know you had some great success in the open jumpers. So when did you transition to teaching? I know you did a teaching degree, as I recall, in Canada. And that's what brought you to Canada. But maybe let's go through the transition in between when you were riding and then when you went to teachers college.
Well, I was highly successful as a junior. I mean, I showed in the medal and the clay and in the open jumper division at Madison Square Garden in the same year. Wow. I was 16. You weren't allowed, you're not allowed to do that anymore. And I placed highly in both. Not allowed to do that. Times have changed. There's a lot of restrictions. When I graduated from high school, I, of course, wanted to ride, and that was it. But my father said, no. I was told I had to have an education. And then once I got an education, I could do anything I wanted. So I went off to college and was not a stellar student. Anyway, I did decide I wanted to go into physical therapy, and then I promptly flunked chemistry, which shut the door on that. And I was in the States and Vietnam was on. So
wow.
It was a hard time to stay. The fact that I flunked chemistry took me out of the program that I was in. And so now I'm just kind of floating around what to do. And my father was Canadian, actually from Cape Breton.
Oh.
And so I decided to go to Dalhousie. I went to Dalhousie. I had already had 2 complete years of university. And ended up at the University of King's College in Halifax. So I ended up getting a BA in psychology, and then I went did an education degree. This is all because of flunking chemistry. My whole life changed. So, and it's a whole new environment for me coming into Nova Scotia, which was not the same horse scene that I had left. Well, anyway, what do you do if you don't know how to do anything else? You give riding lessons. And that I was very lucky that people accepted me and I was able to build a career on it. It was quite something. And then I met my husband, Brian, and we married. And so I was staying here. after the 76 Olympics, Sport Canada started the coaching program to develop homegrown coaches. And I was fortunate enough to be picked as one of the founders of it. And because I had an education degree, this was a plus.
Mm-hmm. I would say that was a big plus for Equine Canada.
And for me, because I have benefited from the coaching program tremendously. I'm forever grateful to it. The coaching program helped. I had the skill for riding and I had an education degree, but the coaching program brought it all together for me. As I went up in the levels of coaching, I was able to access many different courses, and that enhanced my whole idea of teaching and how we're not that different from other sports. Yes, we have the horse and the whole stick that people used to say, oh, but we're so different from other sports. Well, we are in some things, but we aren't in others. The whole thing of the biomechanics that I learned just from them using the example of pole vaulters and how the pole is used to project and everything. Well, that's what a horse's hocks are. And it became fascinating to me. And so a lot of the exercises I was able to develop for the horse were based on knowledge I learned from the coaching program, to learn about strength and flexibility exercises, about conditioning and this type of thing. And then going to the more to the coaching psychology. Fascinating. The coaching program was wonderful to me. It has gone through a bit of a metamorphosis now. I wish it was still the way it was in the old days, mainly because there were so many courses that were available to people. Now it just seems to be a certification program as opposed to a learning program, which it was when it was started.
Yeah, that would be my observation as well. It does seem to be a certification process nowadays. Mm-hmm. And when do you feel like that changed?
Oh, I don't really know. I think probably 20 years ago.
Okay.
Probably.
Yeah, because to the outside, it looks like more, for lack of a better word, a bit of a money grab now for Equine Canada than it is an opportunity for coaches to learn.
That is the perspective of it, and I don't think it's unfounded. Again, I think it's because people have changed. People don't want to do courses. They go, oh, I don't have time for that. I've got to get to shows. I've got to be doing this, and this. Well, maybe you need to take some time to improve yourself and not just keep doing the same thing you're doing about putting people in the ring. Mm-hmm. I think it goes to what your passion is for the sport and for the learning and the progression of the sport. I really believe in the progression of the sport. If we don't keep infusing knowledge and we just keep doing the same thing in the training or in the teaching, we're stagnant. It almost seems as if the only thing that's progressing is the fashion aspect of it. And I'm sounding like a miserable old fart about it, but I think it's true.
I think your comments are well-founded. I know I had a conversation with Jill Henselwood a while ago, and she talked about how important it was for her to be a student of the sport. She's still reading books and learning exercises and constantly exposing herself to new things to help her in her riding and help her teaching people. So I think that's a very valid point that you make. And I was also curious, so where did your passion come from? I mean, it sounds like you had it from a very early age, but was there someone in your family that in your history, or where did it come from?
Well, there weren't many activities when I was growing up. And so I was fortunate to do the horses. I mean, when I was growing up, there were no sports for girls. Mm. There was Little League for boys. There was all of that. So girls couldn't do anything. I think you could do gymnastics. And so the horses were available. The bottom line was I was not a very good student. And so the horses are what saved me. So that's the passion. I mean, they saved me, and they save a lot of kids. And as it turns out, I'm not as stupid as the schools were telling my parents I am. And I credit the horses for making me want to learn something, giving me that passion, find something. So any kids that are out there, male or female, I don't care. If they're not doing well in school, let them ride and they'll feel better about themselves. And you know what? They'll find out they're smarter than they're told they are.
And what do you feel like the key is in connecting to horses?
Empathy. I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel you learn that?
I'm not sure you learn it. I think it's released in you by the horses.
Ah, interesting. I was mostly curious because I spoke with an animal communicator about a month ago. And it was interesting. I was asking her exercises you could do to improve your communication with your horse. And one of the first things she mentioned was play. Mm-hmm. She said, play with them, but play with them on their terms. And also she talked about just being present when you're with them and you're doing things like grooming them and putting them away and tacking them up. And I thought, yeah, that's so interesting because I know a lot of people are often in a rush, or they may have someone else even doing that process for them.
This goes back to what I think people are missing now. When I always did all my own work, even when I was at shows with George, even at Madison Square Garden, I did my own work, except for the grooms would hold the horse if we were, having to look at the horse or something. But when we were at home, again, very fortunate where I grew up, there was 150 acres of woods behind us. And then on the other side of that was a fancy housing development was being developed. They built the Better Homes and Gardens House of the Year. They built it every year. Oh, and the woman who owned this woods, she had a roadway put in so she could drive her Bentley to look at flowers and things. Well, that roadway became our cross-country area. I mean, these are the horses that I rode at Madison Square Garden, and we're running through the woods like maniacs. And we used to play a game that we called General Murilli's. General Murilli's, you should look him up. He was Mexican, and he won the gold medal, individual gold medal, I think, at the Mexico Olympics. But anyway, he was an interesting man. He got charged with murder, which is a story unto itself. And because he shot somebody at a stop sign or something, at least this is the story we thought. And we're young teenagers, and of course the story got embellished in our heads. Murilli's is arrested, he goes to jail, but he breaks loose from jail. And so instead of playing cowboys and Indians, we played General Murilli's, which meant we were running from the police. And we would charge through the woods. We made our own paths, we had jumps and everything. And then we would get to the housing development. Of course, they would dig foundations. We used to jump these horses into foundations.
Wow.
And then run up where the tractor had gone in. We jumped culverts, those big cement culverts and things. We were thorough. Anyway, and I said it in my book that my ordinary horses did extraordinary things for me because they liked me as much as I liked them. And we had trust. And it was because, well, we had to trust each other. We were being so crazy. Oh, and it was so much fun. It was a good thing my parents and George Morris never really knew what was happening.
And where did your sister end up in all of this? Did she continue to ride as well?
No, she rode a bit, and then she got married. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I have to admit, I didn't know that you had a sister. So I didn't realize that you grew up riding with a sibling, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Nice that you had the company.
And my father was very involved, as my mother was.
And did you have pony club in those days? Was that part of
Not
your,
in our,
no?
No, not in our area, but the Stewarts, being at the Stewarts was like being at a pony club.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can well imagine it was.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to ask about your connection with New Zealand. And I understand that you fairly early on were going and training over there doing clinics. Was your connection with the eventers, or was it with the show jumping, or with all? Because I was also interested to see that you've done a lot of training with a lot of different disciplines, which kind of speaks to your well-roundedness in terms of education, and also the fact that you have a degree in psychology or studied psychology. I would think that would be very beneficial for riders because so much of it is in your head. So tell me about your connection to other countries.
Okay, so in the early 90s, I actually closed the barn down here, and I just started doing some local clinics and things, and actually went back to teaching school. Anyway, there were two people from New Zealand who were in New Brunswick. They were deer farmers when farming was a big deal.
Oh.
They were from New Zealand, and I said, if you ever go back to New Zealand, I want to go too. Just basically a flippant remark. Well, they went back to New Zealand. This was also when New Zealand was starting their coaching program.
Oh.
And so I went over to do a clinic, but the coaching people there found out that I had actually written the level 3 coaching program. And so that opened up another aspect of me going there. And I helped a bit with their program, which then led into helping with their young rider program, which is a fabulous program. I ended up going for 25 years.
Oh my goodness.
Which is why no one saw me around here very much. I would go twice a year.
Wow.
So, I mean, it started out, basically I was just going for the jumper people because they didn't have a lot of hunters down there, but they do now. Third of eventing is show jumping. And so the eventers started coming in. Again, I found it absolutely fascinating because my idea of what an event worth looks like was totally crashed when I got to New Zealand because, well, here in Canada, we kind of thought, well, if it's a little bit crazy, but it can jump, we'll make it a jumper. If it can't jump that well and it is crazy, let's make it an eventer. When these horses in New Zealand started coming to me that were eventers, I was just gobsmacked, as they would say. And I'm going, this horse is too nice to be an eventer. And they're going, no, you do not understand. I said, I obviously don't. And so I learned about eventers, and eventers are, the riders and the horses are absolutely amazing. And so that's how it started becoming very interested in the eventing and show jumping.
And it seems like you're still going to New Zealand. Is that right? Did I?
Well, COVID kind of killed that.
A little bit, yes.
But I'm still connected with them in that I went to Kentucky to watch Fender 3-day in May. Was it May? Yeah. Because one of the girls that I taught in New Zealand, and actually a horse that I used to own, was competing. Yeah.
Huh.
Monica Spencer on Artist. They were seven.
Oh, interesting.
And then Clark Johnson went to the Olympics, and I used to teach him, and he actually wrote the foreword in my book.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So that's a full circle moment for him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the life events that you experienced. One thing that struck me when you were talking about when you were going off to school, that was Vietnam. And I'm thinking you were quite young. What's your recollection from your perspective of that event? The reason I bring it up is because I also know that when we touched base last week, you were mentioning that you were at the Royal going down the ramp when you heard that JFK was assassinated. And I thought, gosh, these are big moments that you've experienced in your lifetime. And what did that mean, I guess, in your head, irregardless of the horses?
Well, Vietnam didn't have much of an impact on me because I was a girl, and girls don't get drafted. The effect that it had on, only effect it had on me was when I was no longer in the physical therapy program. That spot had to go to someone else.
Okay.
And guys were trying to get in there because if you were in school, you didn't get shot at. It was that simple. The Kennedy thing had a very big impact on me. Again, I was 16, and we were at the Royal, and I was showing in the junior division that year. And I was literally on the ramp going up to the stalls when Kindry Bailey came and said, "Your cousin has been shot."
Mm-hmm.
And it was a bigger deal because my mother and a friend had driven a friend and me and the horse up to the Royal, and my mother didn't drive trailer. So it was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
We went to where the American team was stabled, and they were gone, just gone, nobody there. So anyway, finally got hold of my mother, and we were told by actually the show, the secretary at the Royal, that we should call the American embassy because the American team was not going to be riding because the country was in mourning. I was the only American junior showing, and what was the protocol here? So called the embassy. They said, yes, you go and ride. And I had a wonderful, and I ended up being the top junior, and I was presented to Vanier.
Wow.
The next night, in under a spotlight, as they played the American national anthem with muffled drums and muffled trumpets.
Holy smokes. That had to be a very, very emotional time for you.
And so I always know November 22nd.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Wow, and I can't believe you were the only American junior.
Yeah, times have changed 67 years ago.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit struck by all of that because I feel like as Canadians, we haven't experienced these things. Thank goodness, the tough things that you may have endured as an American. But I'm always struck by what comes from that. Apparently, in your case, you had a lot of strength and you continued, you made it through the show. But even just to know that there would have been a protocol, that you would have contacted the embassy to say, what does this look like if I go ahead and move on? And yet also, I imagine you're trying to process your own feelings about all this at 16.
Yeah, it was a weird time, but obviously the emotion down in the States would have been bigger than it was in Canada. But yeah, it was pretty big. And then to complete the story, when we're finished, now remember my mother drove us, and she doesn't usually drive the trailer, and now we're going over the Peace Bridge back into the States when it was announced that Ruby had shot Oswald.
Oh.
And we're pulling into, you're supposed to go off to the side because we have livestock. My mother doesn't get over to the side. She gets in the wrong thing. And the customs guy, immigration guy, you got to be over there, lady, back up, blah, blah, blah. And she just looked at him and said, I don't back up.
It's not in my repertoire.
Nope, I don't back up. He went, okay. He let us through.
Gosh.
So all mothers, when they drive their kids to a show, all you have to do is say, I don't back up. Someone will always help you.
True enough. True enough. So I guess my next question for you would be, who do you feel today as a rider, whether it be in the States or internationally, really has it all together?
Of course, Beezy Madden is my new hero, of course. She isn't competing as high as she was. And of course, you have McLean Ward. But I still love Marcus Enning. I love watching him run. Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting you mentioned Beezy because Beezy's always been my hero as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And at the last barn I rode at, it was considered a huge compliment if the trainer said that was very Beezy Maddenish. When we did a course at home, that's what we all aspired to.
my biggest compliment from George is in one of his books, he said that I was the Beezy Madden of the 60s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive. And so how long did you continue to ride yourself? Or would you still be riding, would you be flatting horses today?
No, I haven't ridden quite a while because my heart and soul were into it, but my body wasn't. I was blowing knees, and it was decided that probably I should just stay on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the teaching really took over.
Okay. And then have you done any breeding at all? Because I know you've had horses, but have you?
No.
No. There would be no time for that.
No passion for that.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So where would you say today is, if you were going to suggest someone buy a horse, are you for the European bred or the American bred? Or because I know I was speaking with, actually, interestingly enough, Sean Wordley, and he tries to buy horses that were bred in the States. So I was just curious, if you were to be talking to someone, would you have a preference?
I don't really have a preference. I just think a good horse is a good horse.
Fair enough.
I'm still a thoroughbred person, or I like horses that, well, the new warm bloods that are coming are much more thoroughbred-like than they were initially. The first ones they sent over are like riding a small pony at all times. A good horse is a good horse, and I think they're not as easy to find anymore. Fortunately, I haven't had to look for any, but recently that it seems that people are just shopping off the internet. I don't know.
And what do you feel makes a good horse?
Heart.
I like that.
The horses that I had the most successful with, I said earlier, they were probably pretty ordinary horses, but they didn't know it. I think they have to have heart. I think they have to, which means they like their job, they have a work ethic, and they stay sound.
Those are very valid points. Honestly, when I ask most people what makes a good horse, they have very specific details on their conformation, but I think that's exceptionally simple, yet probably fundamentally important in choosing a horse. I think the heart, that you're right, that says it all right there.
But you also have to realize I'm not looking for Olympic horses. I would be looking for amateurs and things, and so their temperament and heart is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do they like practicing? People need to practice. So if they don't like horse, doesn't have a work ethic, and it isn't sound, you're in trouble.
That's so true. I can tell you, I had an amateur horse years ago that hated practice. He was very intolerant, and I thought, not really a great choice for an amateur horse.
That's my point.
I'm going to make mistakes, and he is not tolerating them.
And they have to have a sense of humor.
Yes, I think you're right about that. So I guess just a couple more questions I wanted to ask. One of them is, where do you think the sport is going today?
I don't really know. I don't know where it's going. I think it needs changing. I don't think you go back to the past, but I think you can learn from the past. This is going to sound really weird, but I actually think COVID was good for horses and people in some ways. I think because there were no shows, people connected back to why they were actually showing. It was all because of a horse. They got connected to the horse again, as opposed to just connected to showing and competing and thinking about that piece of satin. People started enjoying the horse. They started doing more with them. They actually started hacking. Around here, people were going on beach rides and all of this. I think it was a good time. And I think that has affected what's happening. People have found the passion a bit. The fact that the whole horse thing has become so expensive. People are starting to look at other ways to enjoy the horses. I mean, there are adult riding clubs, coming up. There's actually a new thing is opening up here. It's kind of a pony club for adults, and they're booked full. people want this type of thing. They're just saying we don't just have to compete. We can enjoy them. I think that needs to be pushed more. I mean, I think they're the elite, no question, and they need to be supported, but I think the other people also have to be supported, and I think that's starting to happen with adult pony club thing and riding clubs and this type of thing.
And then I guess my last question would be, what does the future hold for you with horses? Where would you like to be in a couple more years?
I just really like teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have knowledge that can be spread. Mm-hmm. And I would like to do that.
Well, I think given your history, that it's probably a pretty realistic idea to see that you will be continuing to teach.
Well, I've been going to your area, to Ottawa, for over 30 years. Go to West Star and started at Fiddler's Green and then transferred over to West Star. And I look forward to that. That will be the first clinic I do of the year, and I look forward to it.
Well, I look forward to potentially getting to meet you there when you come.
Have you actually seen Stride Control? Isn't it pretty?
Oh, it is. It's beautiful. I was going to say yes, and I should remind everybody that your book is still out there, Stride Control. I didn't ever ask you exactly what prompted you to write at the time.
That is a good question. And it comes from me being a teacher and doing all these clinics. And I would do the clinic and then go, oh, God, you're just brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And I go, and then they go, but we don't know what to train. I went, we've been doing all of this. You should keep doing that. Well, we won't remember it. So, being the teacher, I started doing handouts.
Mm.
And then those handouts turned into magazine articles for a publication in Australia. And then those magazine articles turned into a book, because really, how hard would it be? It's very difficult. And that's how it all happened. And Trafalgar published it as Stride Control.
That's so fascinating. I'm thinking that's really organic. That's about as organic as you get. And are there any more books in your future? Are you thinking of any that you would want to write?
I think the only one that I would write would be about the wonderful people I've met because of horses.
I feel like that would be a really entertaining book.
Mm-hmm. It would be very entertaining.
Well, I'd like to see that happen.
I'll try and do it.
Okay. Well, I really want to thank you so much, Jen, for your time today. It was really a pleasure to get to speak with you, and I look forward to potentially seeing you when you come to Ottawa next, and I wish you all the best with your future endeavors.
Well, thank you very much. It's been great fun.
If you would like to learn more about upcoming guests, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Horse Tales with Kat.